You're all set, Diane.
Okay, thank you, Rowan. Good evening, everyone. I want to say thank you for everyone that's here this evening. Today is March 16th, 2022. This is our very first Board of Education Multilingual Learners Committee this evening. We have a lot to learn, a lot to discuss. It's going to be important information this evening, and I personally want to thank for those of you that are here this evening that I have reached out personally. You will understand why this is very important to myself and the district, and thank you again. So the first thing we're going to do is the Pledge of Allegiance. We usually have a video, and we just, I introduce the children, but we don't have a video this evening, so we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance ourselves this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I also want to introduce, I have Colin Hostin, Board of Education Chair with us this evening. Myself, Diana Carpio, Vice Chair of the Board of Education, and I am going to pass it over to Dr. Estrella to introduce herself and her team. After that, I will have the panelists all introduce themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Carpio. So I have a number of team members here that will be supporting this conversation today. We have Ms. Frances Cyrus, who is the Education Administrator for Multilingual Learners and World Languages. And I know she has some members of her team here to support the dialogue. We also have Mr. Robert Pennington, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Schools and works in tandem with Ms. Cyrus in order to effectively support our multilingual learners throughout the district. I'm just going to give them a moment to introduce themselves. I'm just noticing that the screen is only allowing one person to be viewed at a time. Is everybody seeing the screen the same, or is it just me?
Probably just you. I have multiple people at the bottom.
Okay, I just noticed that. Okay, thank you. Ms. Cyrus, would you wish to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Good evening, board members. My name is Frances Cyrus. I am the Education Administrator for Multilingual Learners and World Language. I've been in this capacity for 4 months now. It's been a very exciting and rewarding experience so far. I'm learning a lot, but I also made a few observations and findings about the multilingual learners in our community, and I would love to share that with you. So I'm so excited about having a ML subcommittee who could have these conversations with our team and the district. So I'm really happy to be here.
Says you want to introduce Taylor, who's with us?
Taylor, could you introduce yourself, Taylor?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Da Silva. I'm the Assistant Education Administrator for Multilingual Learners and World Languages. I have been in this position since the end of July this past summer.
Thank you, Taylor.
And good evening, everyone. Rob Pennington, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. Really excited that we have a new subcommittee starting because we have a lot of work that we have started and will continue to do, and just really excited to support all of our students.
Thank you. And that's it for the team, correct? I'm trying to see the names on the chat.
Yes.
Yes, that's everyone.
Okay. All right, so I am going to go with Yesenia next.
Hi, good evening. My name is Yesenia Martinez. I got invited to be a panelist by Diana Carpio, so thank you. I'm excited to see what you guys are going to discuss and how I can input some information. And that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Jennifer McAllister. Let's see. I know she was on a train, not sure if she's hearing us right at the moment.
Nope, I'm here. Hi, Jennifer McAllister. I was asked by Diana as well to join the committee. I'm extremely excited. I have 2 boys in the Norwalk Public School District, so I'm eager to hear everything that's going on with the multilingual learners and see what we can do to be able to help everybody succeed.
Thank you, Jen.
you.
Kate Morin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Morin. I'm a teacher at Tracy School. I've been teaching for quite some time, but my own personal children went through Norwalk Public Schools, both are graduates, and I am fascinated, having come to Tracy School and have a class with 16 of 18 of my students have English as their second language. So I'm really interested in finding out more about MLL students and how we can support them better in the classroom.
Thank you. Liza Montgomery.
Good evening, everyone. I am Liza Montgomery. I am presently the MLL teacher at the Silvermine Dual Language School and just recently started at Merrimack. I have been teaching for 22 years. I was also a multilingual learner as a student, and I am very excited to be here.
Thank you, Liza. Lauren Chavez.
Hi, everybody. I was invited here by Diana Carpenter to be panelist. I am a foreign language teacher. I teach Spanish at New Gated Country Day School. Been teaching for about 12 years. And I am also a multilingual learner. I grew up in Norwalk and very interested to hear all that's going to happen and anything that I can do to help. So thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you everyone for being here this evening. I'm looking forward to our presentation. So I'm going to move it. I guess I'm going to pass it over to Francis, right? You're going to start us off with the state of the MLL programs across the district.
Yes, thank you, Diana. So today's agenda, there's going to be an overview of Norwalk Multilingual Learners community. I'm going to share multilingual learner data. We're going to start today with the high school data, and in other meetings, because it's very comprehensive, we will talk a little bit about the middle schools and the elementary schools and steps that we're taking to transform the schools so that we could better support our multilingual learners. And so far, the professional development that we've rolled out throughout the district. So a quick overview again of the 5 strategic priorities, and we try to align these priorities to everything that we're doing in our department in reference to future readiness, equity, excellence, engagement, and high quality instruction. Before we begin with our presentation, I want to share some ML terms that are going to be evident throughout the presentation so that we are both in align with the language that we're going to be using throughout. So multilingual learners include students who speak a language other than English at home. And the SIFE students have formal interrupted education. Usually their educational experience has been interrupted due to war, civil unrest, migration, or other factors. Newcomers or recently arrived students are those enrolled into our US schools for fewer than 24 calendar years, less than 2 years. And long-term MLLs or long-term English language learners are those enrolled into the US school for more than 6 years, but are not progressing toward English proficiency. Many times the long-term Ls are students who were born in this country. So we're going to look at a quick glance at Connecticut multilingual learners. As you notice, in Connecticut, there are 169 cities. The Norwalk Public School District is number 7 with the highest number of multilingual learners. This is important to know because our instruction and the way we provide professional development and learning opportunities is based on the students' need and the student populations that's in our classrooms. So presently, the current number of multilingual learners in the Newark School District, please
I think
return
the
to slide
slide-
7.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. So currently, the number of multilingual learners in the Newark School District is 2,183. In the graph, I want to share with you the upward trend. But if you look carefully at 2020, 2021, there was a decline in the numbers of multilingual learners, but most likely due to COVID and the restriction to travel. And then there was a rapid increase in 2021, 2022. At the present time, we're at 2,183, but I'm getting every single day an email of new arrivals and new students coming into Newark School District. So that number might be a little higher by now. So we're going into our MLLs in the country of origin in Norwalk. Most MLLs in Norwalk are migrating from Guatemala and Honduras. But one of the factors that we need to know, and there's the misconception that multilingual learners are foreign born. And the district data shows almost 48 to 50% of our students identify as MLLs are born in the United States. It is clear that students' home language impact their designations, but most important, this data suggests that we need to work together to support all our learners by providing them with the most appropriate, high quality and high support instruction possible, because the highest population of those who were born in this country.
And I think that,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I think this is a really important thing to highlight because there's a big misconception that most of the students that are receiving multilingual services across the district are coming from other countries other than the US. And there's this belief in the community that most of the students we're servicing and the investments we're making is as a result of students that have been migrating from other areas without realizing that they are actually homegrown, for lack of a better word.
Thank you.
I'll just throw in that you know, whether they come from the US or not, they're all equal students and need the equal instruction.
Absolutely, we couldn't agree with you more. We're just highlighting this component because sometimes there are mindsets that are set thinking that because there is an influx of families coming from different places, that is creating an impact in terms of how we resource our schools. And in reality, these are students that we all have to serve regardless of where they're coming from. And yet, in many cases, people don't realize that they are US born.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. And the fact of the matter is that we have to be able to provide quality education for all students in our school community, whether they are immigrants or born in the US. So this chart shows the diversity in Norwalk and the different languages spoken. The highest percentage is Spanish. We have 1,985 multilingual learners that speak Spanish at home. And that's how they identify when they first are placed in school. They have to do a home language survey. And once they identify that there's a language other than English spoken at home, they are identified as multilingual learners. And the second is Haitian Creole, 70 at 3.2%, then Arabic, and then Ukrainian.
Yeah, that's it.
So the demographics for our 2021, now 2022, of the 2,183 students, one of our strategic priorities, equity. and to ensure equity opportunities for all our students, including multilingual learners, gifted and talented, special needs students. And I want to point out in this graph or in this data that Spanish as a native language is at 91%. But if we look at students with disability that are duly identified, that means ML students who have a disability are at a high of 25%. But when we go down to the last column, row, gifted and talented is at only a 2%. And it's a little alarming because Dr. Estrella Equity Priority focuses on ensuring that all students have access to all opportunities and to all programs. So this is something that we're going to look into deeper about those students that are duly identified and those students that have not been screened or identified as gifted or talented and probably are.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What is the test that's given to them to find out whether or not they are gifted and talented? I mean, sometimes they can be a little biased from what I understand. So I'm just curious to see, to understand that better.
So currently the assessments are universal across the district and in many ways have to be redesigned and thought through to ensure that they are built to really assess giftedness regardless of primary, like home language or native language. And that's something that the team will be engaging in further study on. But first, right now, we are focusing the work and looking at where our students are at, what are the services being provided, and where are areas of opportunity for us to really hone in and further develop. So the piece that you just articulated is one of the things that we will be further engaging the team in developing in the near future.
I just wanted to add that my school actually just had a PD on this and talking about how to identify giftedness or talents within all students, and the real need to look at it very holistically and think about different kinds of talents. For example, I have a student whose English is relatively limited, but her talents in math are incredible. What she can do with numbers and access is amazing. So she's actually someone that I've been speaking with our GT coordinator at my school about trying to figure out how to access that and get her into the program, even though her language is limited at this point. She can understand obviously more than she can speak, but it's limited at this point. But there's definitely a talent there, but a lot of it needs to be this really holistic look at the child and look at what talents they have that maybe are beyond a test. So.
Thank you for sharing. So the next slide I will be sharing is the increase of MLs throughout the school district. So the data shows the increase of ML per school. Although the percent increase in high school is fairly low, it is important to note that the highest number of MLLs are at the high school level. If you look at Brian McMahon High School, there's 306 MLLs in that school, and there's been a 16% increase. And if we go down to Norwalk High School, there's 269 MLLs, and there has been, to this time, 7% increase. So we really want to focus and look at high school and their data and make observations of how we could support the high school student population, ML population. And then in the next slide, the pie chart again signals to the high percentage of MLs in the high school. We have 28% just between two high school. P-Tech has a total of actually only 17 MLLs. And in the K to 2, there's a 30%. As you notice, as we go into grades 3 and 5, it starts to decrease the MLLs because at an earlier age, students acquire the language a lot quicker. Taylor and I, my assistant, we went into all the middle schools and high school and elementary school just to gather data on the services that were being provided throughout all the school in the district. And one of the findings we found was that many of the MLLs in the schools were not being provided services. And when I say provided services, they weren't being provided ESL service with an MLL teacher. When they reach level 2 or 3 on the last link, which is the assessment used to assess their language proficiency, they weren't serviced at all. So the high school report that you see in front of you right now shows that only 64% of the multilingual learners at Brian McMahon High School were being serviced. And in Norwalk High, only 60%. So a total of 40-something% of our student ML population were not being provided with services or support.
Can I ask a question? Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes.
How does that happen? How did the kids go to school and then like nobody realizes that they have no services?
I think that there's many things that happen. Sometimes it's due to staffing. Sometimes it's due to decisions that are made that should be corrected. Sometimes what happens is parents are not knowledgeable about their rights, that we have to make an initiative to educate them and really provide the support and the knowledge and the information that they need, that their students should rightfully receive the services. So definitely one of the things that my team did was look at the entire district ML population and look, the first thing we looked at was services and what wasn't being provided. So we put a plan of action throughout all the schools. We're strategically planning with the administration on how best to support the ML students based on the staffing we have. We have to look at budget. We have to look at whatever it takes to be able to provide those services so that all students can be successful. And that's one of the things.
Yeah, so one of the things that we looked at, particularly as I entered the district, was really looking at why certain subgroups of students had such a low graduation rate and what were some of the trends associated with that. And one of the things that we found was that our multilingual learners, their graduation rate was at 62%. From that, when Ms. Cyrus joined the team, she worked with a cohort of members here centrally to look at student transcripts and to look at what were some of the leading causes of why students were not graduating on time. And what were some of the things that systemically we needed to shift to ensure, right? Because it's not an issue of students not having the capacity to do the work. We wanted to make sure that if there were some systemic factors leading to unintended outcomes, that we were addressing them. And one of the things that we noted was, one, that services were not being made available to all scholars that fell under the MLL classification. Two, when you look at credit programming, and I know Ms. Size is going to speak to it in a bit, we noticed that because our multilingual learners were being kept in isolated cohorts, they didn't have opportunities to take the robust portfolio of cohorts that the different high schools were offering. And a lot of the rationale behind that was because of language development. But there's nothing really that inhibits students from having access to these courses with adequate scaffolds and support. So part of what you're going to see later on is how we have restructured the programming portfolio, or the portfolio around programming, to most effectively support our students and to enable them to have the coursework that they need to be able to graduate. Because in many cases, we had students that were not able to graduate because they weren't provided the opportunity to take the courses they needed to meet the requirement. And there were a number of factors associated with that we had to problem solve around to make sure that the course portfolio for our MLLs mirrored the course portfolio being offered to all students across the district.
So they were short credits and the families weren't aware or did not know exactly what to ask or how to help, or didn't even know because they didn't understand.
I think it's multi-layered. I think families didn't, coming from, in some cases, from countries that had educational systems very different from ours.
Hi there, I'm on a Zoom meeting. Can I call you guys back?
Someone's not on mute.
Oh, yeah, it was okay. It was in a very short.
Alvina?
Sorry.
Alvina?
Yeah, sorry.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm supposed to be muted. What happened?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, there we go. I lost my train of thought for a minute.
About the different schools.
So part of it was our families coming from different educational systems, not having an understanding of how our systems operate, and there's a need for us, and that's part of the work that we're hoping to do in the Family Center. It's going to be to build their understanding and capacity around understanding the complexity of the American education system. I think too, many of our MLLs had advisors, but advisors that didn't speak their language, and not being able to communicate effectively with their advisors. They themselves didn't understand what they needed to do to prepare themselves to graduate. So there's a number of elements, and I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead, that we're working on to address these factors as well, some of which are bringing in school counselors that are bilingual, so that students can have access to the resource in a language that they understand. But I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cyrus so that she can continue with the presentation, and we will interject as we go.
Okay, so the next.
Hold on. One quick question about the slide that we're looking at right now. Sure. Could we just define, when you say MLLs were not being serviced, how are we going to define that a student is being serviced?
The way we would define a student being serviced, when you see the numbers for the high school, a student did not see an MLL teacher at all. Okay. At all. So okay. There are also, and that's an excellent question, there are also students who are partially being serviced, meaning that the recommended minutes of service are not being honored, but are partially seen maybe twice a week, when they should be seen, for example, the recommendation for Connecticut MLL's newcomers is being seen every day for at least 1 hour. That wasn't happening across the board. In some schools, like in the elementary schools, that was happening, but as the middle school and the high school, that wasn't happening very often. So the numbers that you see now is totally no service at all.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to be important to preface that minimum requirement do not align to research appropriate, right? So although we're talking about the minimum requirement based on whatever the state has articulated, when you look at those numbers, it is not aligned to a best practice and what the research recommends for language acquisition to take place at the rate it needs to in an effective manner. And that's why if you go back to, can you go back to the slide that shows the number of multilingual learners receiving special education services?
Yes, that's slide 10.
And that's why when you look at this particular
slide 10.
Wait, that's not the slide.
That's not the slide. Taylor, go to slide 10.
Let's go.
Down. Keep going. Keep going.
Right there. You will see that 25% of our multilingual learners are being identified as needing special education services. That is a really high number. And part of that we are hypothesizing is associated with the fact that they have not received enough service hours to develop language at a rate that aligns to the research, and could be identified as either language impaired or needing language developmental services, not necessarily because there's a disability, but because they have not received adequate service hours. So as we continue to look at the work, this is an element that we need to focus on and hone into, because if students are not receiving adequate services, it will delay the language progression over time. So we want to make sure that when we talk about what is appropriate and what is a research-based aligned amount of hours of service based on where the child is, either at the beginning stages of language development, towards the intermediate stages or more advanced, that we can clearly articulate and define what that looks like, because it's different at the within the different stages. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that really allows students to grow at a pace that would make sure and ensure that will ensure the success.
So as Dr. Estrella was stating about the graduation rate, the next slide I want to share with you is a comparison between the non-MLL and MLL graduation rate, which is slide number 15. So in slide number 15, at Brian McMahon, for the 2019-2020 school year, the MLLs were at a 67.2% graduation rate, compared to non-MLLs who were at a 92.7%. In Norwalk High, and I'm going with last year, in Norwalk High, there was a 59.3% graduation rate, while the Norwalk High non-MLLs were at an 89.83. The total district MLL graduation rate for 2019-2020 was at a 62%. And this definitely was alarming to us. And that's why we continue to look at the data and do observations and provide professional development. We still are gathering some data. We've only been doing this for the past 4 months. The total district non-MLL graduation rate is at 89.4%. Based on this number, our team with the ML department with the curriculum team decided to start to pull transcripts and look at what is going on in terms of why MLL students are not graduating at a much higher rate. And in our findings, we review each 12th grade transcript one by one and check their courses, the courses that they were being offered, courses that they weren't receiving, and why they were not meeting the graduation rate. And in our findings, we pulled 53 transcripts for 12th graders so we could set a plan forward on how we could support them and provide them what they needed to be able to graduate by this year. And in our findings, 27 students out of the 53 were not on track for graduation. In Norwalk High, we pulled, I think in a total of maybe 110, 115 transcripts, and 64% of the ML students were not on track for graduating this year. It was a 30 to 47 MLOs. What we did was, as a team, got together and reached out to the guidance department, reviewed transcripts, and put a plan of action in place to make sure that if a student needed a course that wasn't offered, that was sometimes the case, we offered it for the second semester, or make sure that they attended Twilight. Dr. Estrella opened up Twilight for students also that were missing credits. Usually Twilight is an evening course for only going to evening, but if there was a students that needed one STEM course or one science course, she allowed them to go to school during the day and be able to pick up that course that they needed for graduation. And some online courses. What happened, and I'm going to show you in terms of the program of study, how that impacted the MLs not being able to be scheduled for some courses that they need for graduation. And that was impacting the time frame that they graduated. So instead of graduating in 4 years, due to the program of study that was available to them, it would take them 5 or 6 years to graduate. And we're going to talk a little bit about that after. On the next slide, I'm sharing so far from the data for observations, talking to children, what were some of the findings, and we're still in the process of doing some more observations with Dr. Walkie and reviewing all programs and how we could best support not only the MLL students, but all students to be successful. So one of the findings was there was very limited bilingual programs. Most of the courses throughout the high school and some in the earlier elementary and middle school is that there were shelter English. So when I talk about shelter English in the classroom, is that some courses were identified as MLL courses, but it wasn't because they were being provided with either a bilingual or a duly certified teacher, but that was the course that was designated to place ML students in there. So as I stated before, the high school graduation rate was at a 62 percentile. We're positive about that graduation going up. The courses offered were very limited and not offered to MLO students. MLO students were not placed in English courses until their fifth year of high school. A few students who did come with some basis in the native language arts, who performed really well in their language, and also came with some background English from their native country, those students were sometimes placed in what we call the exploration course or not only the foundations course. Those students might be able to graduate in 4 years, but the bulk of the students were placed in 4 years of different ESL courses that I call intermediate courses. Some of them really wasn't challenging to our students. They did not receive instruction from an ELA teacher until their, most of them until the 4th year of high school or 5th year of high school. They were limited to the core courses, and some of them weren't even, had available courses during the summer for them to make up any of the courses that they had not received. We also noticed that the registration and intake process also impeded on students being enrolled as quickly as possible to get them into school. So that's something that we're going to be taking a look at, the registration and intake process. How do we get those students transcripts from their native country and make sure that those courses that they already acquire, that they're embedded into their transcripts and review, so that students are not staying here a 5th or 6th year being discouraged and not continuing school. Some of the students, one of the things that we found that was really alarming is that we found some students in study halls and not being placed in math or science courses that they required to graduate because there was no space in the ML classes. But we have to change that program of study where we must integrate our ML students in all the classes and avail them with an ML teacher to support them. But we cannot put a student into a study hall because there's space in one place, but it's not identified as an ML course, and the ML courses are full capacity and there could be a grievance. What we need to do is provide them with a quality education that they rightfully deserve and the courses that they need to be able to graduate. So that being said, due to the fact that there were many double periods in ESL courses, ENL courses, the heaviest load for the ML students were at their senior year or their 5th year, where all the core courses that they did not receive throughout the years were being packed in 12th grade. I'll give you an example. If they had to take Algebra 2, chemistry, it was all at the 12th grade level instead of spreading it out like it's done for the general ed population.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So there was no red flags. I don't know why everything is echoing right now. There were no red flags on these children that were in study hall and that they were running behind on credits.
I'm pretty sure that whoever was running the program before was aware, because they would be managing the course load and program opportunities that were being offered to students. It was something that became immediately visible to us coming into the district and really looking at why our graduation rate was low, what were some of the associated factors leading to these outcomes, and really figuring out what was stopping our students from being able to graduate like their non-MLL peers. And sometimes people have the mindset that because they're learning a language that could be an inhibiting factor. I am not of that belief, and it was evident based on our findings that the challenge was more systematic in terms of how the program of study was set up for these students and how choices and options were being limited. One of the things that, in terms of the funding sources that we are realigning, and we've been in conversation with the finance team, is that all of our schools, based on the SBB process, receive funding for all of the multilingual learners in their building. Plus, we've centrally funded the teachers that were providing the services for these students. So it's a matter of the leadership in each school working in tandem with Ms. Cyrus and her team to really work to rethink in terms of how we are strategizing and programming our students, because the resources are there. It's a matter of how we strategically allocate them to ensure that that all students have access to the course portfolio that we have across the district. And one of the things that we're making sure is not only that they have access to this course portfolio during the school year, but also during the summer. Because in the past, what was happening, it was that students that needed MLL services were limited to only a certain number of courses that were being offered in the summer and didn't have access to courses that were being offered holistically for the campus at large. And what we're doing differently now, particularly this upcoming summer, is that we're making sure that all students, including MLL students, have access to the full course portfolio available so that we can support them in meeting their graduation requirements.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. My only question was, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm really visual and I'm trying to figure out, what does that look like in a chemistry class when you're saying, I don't know, like what's the first chemistry class you take? Is it just straight chemistry in high school? So when you're in a chemistry class and we want to make it accessible for all learners, what does that look like for an MLL who perhaps doesn't have access to all the language? When you say support, is that within the class? Is that someone pushing in, an assistant is taking the notes? I'm just trying to figure out like how do we support a child who doesn't necessarily have all the language, has all the intellect available to them, but just doesn't have it it's not their language yet. It's not in their native language. How do we support them? Like, what does that look like?
I
just wanted to piggyback on that as well. I just wanted to also try to understand the social emotional development that each child has and how that's being supported. I think a lot of the times when you're feeling, when you're not feeling comfortable in a situation, a lot of the times that hinders self-advocacy. It hinders a lot of things that most children who are comfortable with the language are able to provide for themselves and be able to, like I said, advocate. I was also curious about what kind of on-ramp there is for students when they come in. Are they just like thrown into the school and, it's kind of like figure it out? Or is there something that gives them some kind of, a little bit of a breather before they go? And then my last question that I have is, how many students stay for a 5th or 6th year? And do they, and if they stay for a 5th and 6th year, do they actually graduate?
Okay, so these are some loaded questions, right? Because there's a number of layers to them. I think first with Kate's question in terms of how do you scaffold supports, there's a number of things that we do. First and foremost, our ultimate goal is to find duly certified staff that, one, speak the language and have the content expertise. And that's something that the MLL department has been working to identify more folks that are duly certified, but most importantly, that they at a minimum can speak the language, right, to support the students. Two, when that is not available, having para educators that are language support paras pushing into the classroom and providing those scaffolds and support. And a third model is where you would have the content expert with the MLL provider, teacher in this case, pushing in and working in tandem together, almost like in a co-teaching special education classroom, in the same way, creating the same environment for multilingual learners where you have 2 teachers in the room, providing scaffolded supports around the services. Around the SEL work, one of the things, and Francis, feel free to interject if I'm missing anything that we've been talking about and Francis has been advocating for, is really aligning our school counselors within the MLL cohort to be bilingual and first and foremost be able to have conversations with students in their language of preference, right? Or their native language. Because a lot of what's happened is that a lot of students have not really accessed the guidance support that they might need because they don't know how, they're unable to communicate. So first and foremost is bridging the language barrier for the students. The piece that you talked about around ramping up and developing an entry plan for students coming in for the first time is something that we're building. It's not something that currently exists. And it is instrumental as as students are being onboarded into our schools to really have a robust process in which we connect them to the new learning environment, particularly build their familiarity with what to expect in a system that might be very different than what they're accustomed to. So I haven't seen that, and Francis can speak to that. That coming in, that has not been in place, and it's something that we're working to implement. The 5 to 6 year data is something that we're looking at. A lot of our kids have had to spend a 5th year in receiving coursework because of what was articulated before, that they have not had the full array of course portfolio that would allow them to graduate on time. And I know that Francis in the later slide will talk about the previous continuum of course provided and how that continuum is being shifted to ensure that students have the ability to graduate in 4 years, not 5. But the exact numbers of that, I don't think we have a slide on that, but we can definitely present that at our next meeting.
Okay. Ms. Chavez, that's a very good point that you made. Throughout our visit in the high school, it's something that came up in conversations with the students when I interviewed actually 2 days ago, ML student. One of the things that I asked was, if we were to provide more support for MLL students, what would that be? And what she responded was, when I first came into the school, I felt lonely. And I think what really helped me was one student took the initiative to show me around the school, to introduce me to the school, to show me how to read my classes. And the student next to her that was also being interviewed shared that the person that helped her was the same person that helped him when she first came into it. I share that with the principal because that young lady really deserves accolades for making it an initiative, her own initiative, to really support new students that come into Norwalk High School, especially the MLLs. And that's something that we really need to also focus on, making them feel welcome and included, and supporting their social and emotional growth.
Is there I'm sorry, is there a possibility of having students, the other students, like setting up a program where maybe it's like a, you know, they get, yeah, and they get college credits or something to that effect, so that they can help them and they know the lay of the land and be able to give them, even, I know that happens a lot of the times with kids coming in from the middle school going into the high school. The high school kids give the middle kids school, those kinds of tours. Why not for these children that really, really need it? I think that would be something to think about. So, but thank you for answering my question.
And then something,
I'm sorry, and that's a great way to teach students community service, right? And supporting students within their own school. So yes.
And also communication skills. But I think it's a really valid point, because I also had the opportunity alongside Dr. McBride to meet with a cohort of students that, in the MLL program, and a lot of what they expressed to us is the need to really have individuals that they can connect to really help them understand the process, because there was a lot of ambiguity for them in terms of what it was that they needed to do to be able to succeed in high school and to be able to graduate. In many cases, as some of the students expressed, in their former country, you don't need to focus on credits and acquiring certain coursework in order to graduate. As long as you met the coursework requirement for that year, you advanced to the next grade until you graduated. So it was a very different structure to the structure that we have here. And part of the work that we will be embedding is also building their awareness in terms of what does it take in our system for you to be able to graduate, and what are the things that you need to track and keep in mind. And that's where the school counselor is going to become instrumental, because that individuals will be the people that will be leading that conversation.
And going back to the slide, this slide, ML Excellence Shift in terms of the program study, that slide number 18, Taylor. So
Ms.
here it
Sells,
is.
Can I add one piece as
Sure.
one of the pieces that if we were to look at the graduation rates over the last historical data points, one of the pieces is that we saw our MLL graduation rate drop from the 80th, I think it was 80% down to into the 60s. And one of the things that I think occurred is that our graduation requirements were increased. But at that time, the supports for our multilingual learners did not shift. So you saw, I think it was 2018, graduation requirements were 20 credits, whereas now our seniors need 25 credits. And so that type of instructional shift and program shift, I don't know if that has occurred. So this is a really important need for our multilingual learners. And I want to just commend the team that has been working so hard to make this shift. So
thank you. So if you look at the slide at the left side of the slide, this is the current course sequence for multilingual learners. So I'll give you an example. Course 1 is MLL coming into 9th grade, has an English foundation course, double block. That double block impeding an additional course. Then in the second year, that student has a double block of English development. These courses are solely offered by MLL teachers. Then in 11th grade, gets English exploration course that is also offered by an ML teacher. And now the student is an 11th grader. And in his 4th year, he has or she has an English literature course that's also solely by an MLL teacher. The double block courses that you saw in course 1 and 2, those courses, those credits are split between an English class and a humanities class. But for an MLL student to be able to graduate, he must have or she must have at least one of those English courses taught by an ELA teacher. The ELA teacher comes into play when that student is taught the transitional English course, or if a student is placed in an English 1 course. So the bulk of our students go through this experience. They enter in foundations or development based on the last link scores. But many of the courses, when Taylor and I went to observe in terms of English development and English exploration, we really couldn't tell the difference between those 2 courses. So one of the recommendations our department made was, how do we provide support to the MLLs, but still offer them the courses that they require to be able to be successful and be able to graduate in a timely fashion, providing them with high quality instruction with support and a shift of mindset that says that they can do it and that we can have them be successful if we provide them with the high support they need. So for example, on your bottom right of the screen is the proposed plan for current new arrivals, newcomers. Those are the students that have not been in the US, that have been in the US for less than a year. Those students, we are recommending get the foundations that they need the first year with the double block and the English development, but allowing them that in their third year at least, they receive a transitional English course with an ELA teacher, but with a pushing multi-MLL teacher so that they get not only the ELA instruction, but that they get an ESL teacher that could provide them with the support to be able to have access to that course. And then they will continue with the general ed population English courses. They are not segregated for the lifetime of being in a high school in this country. And then it will look a little different in terms of those students. For example, in the middle school, we have students who were in middle school for 2 years, but because they score a high 2 or a level 3 or 4 in the last links, they were not provided with an MLL teacher to support them. As soon as they hit those level 3s and 4s or high 2s, most of the students did not get support. But then when they go into the high school, some of the students are a little upset because they speak the language, but they're struggling with the reading and the writing. And based on the assessment that they are given, they are placed in a ESL course, and they're saying, why am I in this class? For the past 2 years, I've been in an ELA class in middle school. So our recommendation for those students coming in from the middle school, they should be placed in an English 1 course with the support of an ML teacher. And this is where you need to see it visually and what it looks like, that question that you pose, because I'm a visual learner as well. And they will be provided with the support, and it would be a co-teaching model. But having full access to the English curriculum that they rightfully deserve and follow the scope and sequence and the course sequence for English like any general ed student. Once they test out, then they will continue in the same trajectory, but they do not need the MLL teacher any longer, but we would do check-ins at least. It's recommended that we check in on the MLLs, and once they test out, check in them maybe once a week to make sure that they're getting the support they need to continue to be successful. So that's what it,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Estrella.
I don't know why there's who's doing that? Hopefully this is better. No, it's still echoing. And there's a number of shifts that we're trying to implement. I think for the purposes of today, because there's so many other elements that we want to discuss with you, and we've discussed so many components, we're going to stop here in terms of talking about the shifts. For our next session, we have a number of other components that we are working to modify, particularly in the area in high school, and like further engage around the recommendations. So I think, Ms. Sayas, if you could speak to the overall course portfolio, and we can stop there for tonight. And at our next session, we can speak about all of the other shifts that we're trying to implement based on what we've learned from the review we've done so far.
Okay, so I'm going to move over to slide 20, which you'll be able to visualize what it will look like in terms of high school in the other content areas and in that slide. So our revised program of study, I just explained the English component. In math and social studies and science, that will look a little different. We have numerous meetings with HR. We've been visiting universities, trying to recruit bilingual teachers to provide the instruction in the content, because the misconception is that because they don't know a language, which Dr. Estrella mentioned, is that they don't have the content. Sometimes they do have the content, but they need the instruction to be availed to them in their language. One of the findings when we went to observe classes is that the new arrival students or a student that has a last links as one is sitting in a MLL identified class, but the instruction is in English, and the students are lost because the instruction is in English. But it's not that they do not understand the contents. Sometimes when there's modeling going on, they kind of pick it up. But what that looks like is that in the contents in the high school, the option of having a bilingual, duly certified teacher that could teach the content and teach the instruction in their language, or a co-teaching model as well, where there's an ML teacher or a bilingual aide supporting that student. It's more cost effective if we have a bilingual certified teacher, because you only need one staff member. In the social studies and the science, as they move along, if provided the support in the beginning years of the high school, while they get into their third year, they will be able to do the chemistry, which you were sharing. They'll be able to do those challenging courses, because throughout middle school and throughout these 9th and 10th grade, they were being provided with the support that they needed. That wasn't the case. And I end with that, being able to provide the professional development, which we're going to talk about that in our next session, and how do we support teachers and students to be able to make our multilingual learners as successful as possible. So thank you.
And Ms. Carpio, we turn it over to you. You're muted, Ms. Carpio.
Thank you. There was a lot of information this evening that we had to go through. With all the information that we are trying to absorb and learn and listen and ask questions, I know that we didn't get through the whole agenda. So if there's any questions that you may have at this moment, please speak up now. All right, so with no other questions, I look forward to hearing more discussions, get more information, data, and seeing what we can do collaboratively, putting our ideas together to help all the children, all the MLLs, and all the children graduate. Because for me, it's sad to hear that these children are falling to the wayside. And like Lauren said before, what happens to them if they don't graduate? Where do they go? What do they do? My other question would be, even if they graduate, are they getting support on how to apply to college? What to look at, trade schools and things like that. So for me, myself, I'm going to sit down and absorb everything that we discussed today and write down questions that I may have and ideas. And I would hope that everybody would do the same. And thank you for this presentation to Dr. Estrella, Messias, Mr. Pennington, and everyone here. I know that you guys wanted to show us a lot, but it's a lot of information to try to put together in 1 hour. And then with us being curious and having lots of questions, I feel great to know that everybody is very interested in having these detailed conversations. So with that being said, Colin had to drop off, so I can't even have a motion to adjourn. So I'll motion myself. And yes, if anybody has any questions, you can email me. You have the email from the invite too for anybody here. So if everybody good? We'll see each other
Thank
next
you.
month. No,
Yes.
And we have a few more hours to present.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.